Hello, everyone. My name is David Makepeace from MillerEdge. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for the Eastern US. Today, we are taking a look at an ordering guide or quote guide for sensing edges on gates. So a common question that we see in the field and from customers is how do we choose the correct sensing edge model? And then how do we specify all of those different elements to make sure that we have all the information that we need before we go and get a price or before we go and get this quoted? So we're going to go through this step by step today. You'll see we have this new handy guide that you can use to reference and either have this printed off or refer to this digitally, whatever you need it. So we're going to start up at the top in section 1 and then just work our way down. So the first thing that we need to choose, as I mentioned, is the sensing edge model. So we have various models to select from. And we have two sides here. We've got what we're calling standard protection and then three-sided protection. So to explain that in a little bit more detail, our standard protection, what we really mean is single-sided activation. So with a lot of our sensing edges, what you'll find is they work for head-on activations. So for example, in a slide gate application where the gate is moving this way, I'm going to get an impact from this direction here, and this will activate my sensing edge. It's not necessarily designed, for example, to be activated from the side. The opposite, or the other version of that rather, would be three-sided activation. So as opposed to having just a single-sided activation, we have some options where you'll get activation from multiple sides of the sensing edges, which we'll review. Typically, use cases for those would be swing gate applications, where you're concerned about a motion from the side, as well as perhaps a motion from the front as well. So under the standard protection, we're just looking at surface thickness. So really, what mounting space do I have to put the edge on? And essentially, the smaller that surface is, the smaller the edge model is going to be, the overall profile size. So for example, if you have a 1-inch thick mounting surface, you're going to use something such as the MG110. The MG110 is actually one of our newer sensing edge profiles. It comes with a really nice cap system for mounting. So the cap fits over the top of the sensing edge and the mounting channel. Self-tapping screw goes through here, through this hole, into the channel in the back here, and then into your mounting surface. So a really nice, clean, easy way to mount sensing edges in areas where perhaps you don't have a lot of room. For example, in the draw-in post area on a slide gate, you might have not have a lot of room there to mount a large sensing edge. So the MG110 would be a perfect fit for that kind of application. As the surface area gets larger, you're going to use a larger sensing edge. So for example, we have the ME120 here, which is a very common and popular model for slide gates. We see this quite a lot on the leading and the trailing end of slide gates, for example. And you can go up from there. So you have the MG123. The MG123 is, again, just a slightly larger profile size overall that would allow you to use, if you have a bigger surface area, you can use the MG123 to fit that area a little bit better. On the three-sided, you're going to use a similar method in that we're still going off of the surface thickness. So for example, and I'll start with the MGRs and the MGSs. If you have a 2-inch thick round or square post, then we do have profiles, or close to a 2-inch round or square, then we have profiles to fit those directly. We have the MGR, R stands for round, and the MGS, S stands for square. And those are designed to fit those posts. As you can see, they are really nicely profiled so that it'll give you good coverage around that post, whether it's square or round. And we'll kind of go through some of the more of the options on these particular ones down as we get further into like outlet location, for example. If you don't have a 2-inch round or square post, and you still want three-sided protection, so if this is a swing gate application, for example, then you can use the MG020. So that would be, this is actually the ME120 again. I picked up the same sample here, but the profiles from the exterior look exactly the same. So looking at the two of them, you wouldn't be able to tell apart from the product label. So they will look identical from the outside, the ME120 and the MGO. The difference is on the MGO, the contacts are circular, they're round inside of here. And what that means is that I'll get an activation not only from the front here, but also from the side. So you can get a side activation. So the MGO, we really encourage for use on swing gates. The ME120, we would encourage for use on slide gates. and then a few other applications in between there, depending on what it is. So once you've chosen your sensing edge model, we're going to go down and choose color. So the color is fairly straightforward. Most edges have a black option. Well, all edges have a black option, and there are some edges that have a yellow option as well. So one of the ones that has yellow is the MGR and the MGS. I was holding up earlier on. So here is the shade if you wanted to take a look at it for the yellow. It's a nice bright color. So if you want to make sure that this is really highly visible, then the yellow would be a good option. If you want to be more kind of unassuming, then obviously the black blends in fairly well for most installations. Once you've chosen the color, you can then go ahead and select the outlet location. Now, the outlet location, I think, can be a confusing issue for some folks. We're going to go through this in a little bit more detail. So first off, I want to talk about just handing edges generally, so taking a look at them and understanding what the handing is. So if the wire is coming out of the side, here is how to correctly hand a sensing edge and take one and know whether it's left or right hand, for example. So what you want to do, with the channel side facing up, with the mounting surface facing up, so whether it's one of the edges such as the ME120 would look similar to this, or the MG123, even if it's the MGS or the MGR, you are still going to have these tabs facing up when you're doing this. So with the mounting surface facing up and the wire coming out towards you, so very important to have the wire poking out towards you, so not flipped around with the wire going the other way. With the wire coming out towards you, if the wire, as I'm looking at it, is on my right-hand side, which this one is, it's on my right-hand side, that would be a right-hand sensing edge. If the wire is coming out on the left-hand side as I'm looking at it, that would be a left-hand sensing edge. So that's how you start. If you have an edge out there in the field and you're just trying to work out what you have left versus right, that's a very easy way to do it. That's what I would recommend. So if this is getting mounted horizontally on a gate, that's really kind of what you're thinking about, is just left versus right. And generally what we would encourage is you're going to stand on the same side as the operator. So you're on the operator side of the gate. If the operator is mounted on the left-hand side of the gate, you're going to choose a left-hand exit. If the operator is mounted on the right-hand side, you're going to choose a right-hand wire exit. You also have the opportunity, if you want, to have the wire come out of the end of the edge. If you do that, then it'll look like this. And that will allow you essentially to, in most cases, you can kind of dress it either way, depending on what what the installation and how you want to dress the wire and what you're going to do there. The option gets a little bit more involved when you're talking about vertically mounting sensing edges. So the reason why I say that is that if I've got a left or a right hand, so it's very easy to kind of conceptualize when it's sitting horizontally like this. The second that I move it up horizontal or vertically, sorry, now I'm also concerned about top of the edge and bottom of the edge. So don't forget, this is my right hand. This is my right hand edge here. So if I flip it up, it's on the top here on this side. Yes, I can kind of turn this around. My problem is then it's now, if I'm on the operative side, it's now on the other side of the gate. So when you're thinking about top versus bottom and you're thinking about left versus right, this is still a right hand edge, even though I've flipped it around. So it's still being configured as a right hand edge. You've really got to think about where you want that placement to be, top versus the bottom. If this is my operator side and I want this wire to be on the bottom, I've got to order a left hand to get it down here to this bottom area here. So you've got to kind of think about that as you flip it up and configure it in your head as to where you want the wire to go. Now, again, you can choose to have an end wire outlet here. So this wire comes out of the end here, and that does give you a little bit more flexibility. If you're going to do that, especially on slide gate applications, we generally encourage the wire to point down. And what that does is it just stops water from pooling around the grommet area here, which reduces the chance of water getting into the sensing edge, because we really don't want water to sit and pool around the wire entry, the grommet area. One thing to keep in mind, if you are choosing a left versus a right hand, and we're talking about being on one side of the gate or the other, depending on how you're now flipping this, keep in mind that for a wireless solution, if you're going to use a wireless transmitter receiver, we really want a good direct line of sight. So in an ideal world, what we don't want to happen is have the sensing edge wire be on the opposite side of the gate to where our operator is, where the receiver is, because we now have a potential line of sight issue. We've got the gate that's going to be really in between the transmitter and the receiver at most, if not all the time. So keep that in mind. One final option that I'll talk about, because it's different to doors. If those of you that are familiar with our door edges, we have a universal option for the MGR and the MGS options. So for the round MGR and for the square, we have a universal option. It is different to what you see on doors. So the universal option for these means that the wire actually comes out of the back of the sensing edge. It comes out of the side of that you're attaching onto the gate post itself, for example. What that means is you need to drill a hole through the post to pull this wire through and then dress and go from there. So downside, yes, you're drilling a hole through the post. However, that does make it, in my opinion, a little bit cleaner. You're then not worried about a wire being on the side of the edge here and having to dress that correctly, especially if this is a swing gate and you're concerned about side-on impact. It's nice to be able to bring this through the back of the gate and then almost kind of hide that wire and then make it as good as possible to make sure that you're going to get good, nice, solid contact on all sides of the edges. So that's the same for the MGS and the MGR. You can have that universal outlet that comes out of the back of the sensing edge. So active length. So once we've done the outlet location, we'll move on to active length. The length, again, is fairly simple. We'll just kind of read through this to make sure that folks are comfortable with it. So if the edge is mounted horizontally, you're going to measure the width of the gate and you're going to subtract out the post caps. If the edge is mounted vertically, you're going to measure the full height of the gate post, again, subtracting out the post caps. Keep in mind that per the requirements, you don't need to go above 6 foot. So most gate edges that we see, if they're mounted vertically, they're not more than 6 foot tall. I would say the common sizes are probably 4, 5, 6 foot, some 3 footers in there as well. So keep that in mind in that if this is a vertically mounted edge, you don't necessarily need to go 10 foot high if this is a very tall gate. The other thing to keep in mind is there are some models, and we're noting them here. So there's a note here, some models that exceed 6 feet in length will potentially incur an additional charge for manufacturing and for shipping in some cases. This is because we have some models, such as the MGR and the MGS and the MGO, that cannot be bent or folded for shipment. Because of that, it makes it difficult, as you can imagine, to ship them cost effectively at very long lengths. So again, keep them less than 6 feet. If you can do. If you need to go above that, some of those models we won't manufacture or we won't ship or manufacture over 10 foot anyway, and you'll incur an additional charge over 6. If this is for a horizontally mounted edge and you can use something like the ME120 that we can fold up in a box, for example, no issue there because we can fold this up and that won't be a problem. But if this is one of the other edges that I mentioned and where you're looking at a longer edge, keep in mind that there may be an additional charge for shipping there. So next, after you've selected the active length, we're going to choose the switch configuration, which comes down to really, is this monitored or non-monitored? The way that we're going to work that out is based off of the operator manufacture date. So if this is manufactured after January 2016, it's going to be a monitored solution, monitored sensing edge. If it was manufactured prior to January 2016, you're going to use a non-monitored sensing edge. And to clarify, so the regulation change in 2016 was really universal across entrapment protection devices. So you no longer have a primary, secondary, where one is monitored. For example, one is non-monitored. There is none of that. Everything is now monitored. So whether it's one photo eye, 2 edges, 2 photo eyes, 3 edges, doesn't matter the amount of devices, they all need to be monitored if you're installing them on an operator manufactured after January 2016. If this is a retrofit on an older operator system and you're not upgrading the board, for example, nothing's changing, you're going to use a non-monitored solution. So it's not retroactive in that you're not going to go out there and start using monitored edges on older systems. There is no way, unless you're upgrading the board or doing something else, to interface those two together. So monitored for newer, still non-monitored for older installations. If you've chosen non-monitored, you can go ahead and skip step 6, which is for configuring the monitoring. You don't need to worry about that. So step 6 is really for if this is a monitored solution, then we need to cover and make sure that we're selecting the right type here. So if you selected a 2-wire monitored switch configuration, first step is nice and simple. You're going to select a model T2, which stands for 10K resistive sensing edges. The T2 or the 10K resistive will have a blue wire wrap around the edge here, around the wire. So when you receive it, if you don't see that blue wire, or if you're out there in the field, or you're looking at an installation and you're replacing something, if you see that wire wrap, then for sure you know that this should be a T2. I generally get into the habit of testing anyway, so use your edge tester or ohm meter, for example, to take a look and check and verify that it has that 10 k ohm resistance. That will make troubleshooting later a lot simpler if you're out there in the field. So there is a number of operator brands that support direct connection of the 10 k resistive sensing edge. Those operator brands are listed here under this first section. So you can just select T2, and if that's the case, that's all that you need to worry about. Even if you're hardwiring, you can hardwire the edge straight in there. Now, if the operator branch is not up here that you're working with, if it's down in this next section, what that means is the operator brand is not using a 10 k resistive method. As far as we're aware at the time of making this video, is not using a 10 k resistive method for monitoring entrapment protection devices. They're using something else. So they're either using a 2-wire pulse method, a 4-wire pulse method, or a normally closed method for monitoring entrapment protection devices. So in order to get the edge to work with that system, if you're hardwiring, you'll need one of these modules in order for that module to take the 10 k resistive signal and then convert it to the correct signal it needs to be, either 2-wire pulsed, 4-wire pulsed, or normally closed. Those modules are listed here depending on the monitoring method and the operator brand. So select the right one that's correct for your installation. Again, make sure to check at the time that you're watching this. Things are changing still in the industry. Manufacturers may change what their monitoring methods are. So take a look at the manuals, take a look at the websites, talk to your rep and make sure that you have the latest information. Now, this is for hardwiring. So if you're using a wireless solution, if you're using the R-band from MillerEdge and you're using a monitored wireless solution, you do not need a module. I'll repeat that again. So if you're using a hardwired solution, you need a module. If you're using a wireless solution, if you're using the R-band from MillerEdge, you do not need the module, the Gen 102, 103, or 104. The R-band has that technology built into the system, and you can select the correct output based on what you have, whether that's, is it 10 k resistive, is it normally closed, for example. You can select that based on what you're working with. We have the model names down here so that you can understand what you're getting with the wireless. So for the R-band, the kit version is RB-G-K10. You'll get one receiver and one transmitter with that. In some cases, especially if you have multiple edges and you want to be able to connect up various transmitters to a single receiver, which you are able to do, you can get the transmitter standalone, which is RB-TX10, and you can use up to 5 transmitters with a single receiver. Now, this is a 2-channel receiver, so you can use up to 3 sensing edges on each channel, giving you a total of 6. I would imagine that would cover most installations. If you need to go over that, and obviously it's possible, you have to add an additional receiver, and at that point you may need help configuring. So again, feel free to reach out with questions, and we can help make sure that you get the assistance if it's something that's a little bit more complicated like that. So we've gone through essentially that whole process. We've selected step by step everything that we're going to need, and as we do it, what I recommend is fill out on the right-hand side what you need. So you can have the selection boxes here, your model, choose your color, choose the outlet location, and that way, if you do that and you follow it piece by piece, there's much less chance of getting back into the office or coming back from a customer visit and not collecting the right information. If you have all of that, that should be everything that you need to get an edge priced out or quoted or whatever you may need. So hopefully that has been useful, and thank you for watching the video.